Injustice doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers beneath bridges, disguised as silence. But this time, justice had eyes in the shadows, and a memory that never forgets. The wind had a voice that morning. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight, whispering down the cracked sidewalks of downtown Memphis. It curled beneath a forgotten overpass, tugging at torn coats, rusted shopping carts, and the edges of stories too long left untold. Steam rose from a battered metal barrel that someone had turned into a fire pit. The flame inside flickered with purposes small, persistent, alive. Around it stood two men, their outlines long and thin in the early amber light. One had a bent notebook sticking out of his coat pocket. The other had eyes like polished stone, still and watching. Jeremiah Booker was called Ghost by those who knew him, not because he was frightening. Quite the opposite. He simply had the ability to disappear into a moment, a crowd, or silence. He moved with intention, spoke only when words mattered, and when he did speak, people listened, not because his voice was loud, but because it came from a place deeper than most ever reached. Next to him stood Reggie Slim Dillard, tall, wiry, with a grin that could shine through winter. He had jazz in his bones and a storyteller's spirit. This morning, like most others, he was cracking jokes about old times. Something about a man named Tommy who once claimed to be James Brown's nephew. He danced like a trash bag in a tornado, Slim said, laughing so hard he had to hold on to the barrel for balance. Ghost gave the barest hint of a smile. From the corner of the alley, a young man stood filming them through a cracked phone screen. He wore a hoodie with one string missing and a determined look in his eyes. "Y'all mind if I get some of this for my doc?" the boy asked. "People don't know what's really going on out here." Slim opened his arms like a stage performer. "Shoot away, young blood. Just don't expect Ghost here to win an Oscar." Ghost didn't respond. He was watching the street behind the boy. His gaze swept like radar, quiet but constant. A moment later, a familiar sound echoed against the bricks, the clatter of old wheels, and a voice that could part clouds. "Move, babies. I got breakfast and no time for arguing," called Mama Cass. She came into view like a force of nature, pushing a shopping cart layered with blankets, bags, and love. She moved through the early light with authority. Her coat was older than most of the buildings, but she wore it like royalty. She handed out wrapped sandwiches and coffee like blessings, each one accompanied by a nickname or a scolding. "Ghost, eat. Slim, stop telling lies. And you little D, put that phone down for 5 seconds and take this food." They obeyed, not because she was loud, but because she'd earned it. There was a rhythm to mornings under the bridge. People emerged slowly, as if the city had forgotten them, but they hadn't forgotten each other. There were inside jokes, half-finished, songs, the clink of bottles and rustle of blankets. It was a kind of music that didn't make the charts but mattered more. Ghost ate in silence. His eyes scanned rooftops, corners, reflections in puddles. He wasn't just alert, he was calculating, as if every noise and movement told a story he needed to remember. Slim noticed. He always did. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Quieter than usual, I mean." Ghost didn't look up. "Lot of traffic lately." "Yeah." Slim's voice lowered. "Cops been cruising by slow, like they're waiting on something." "They are," Ghost replied, taking a slow sip of coffee. Little D captured the moment, the way Ghost stared off into space like he could see through buildings, the way Slim, for all his jokes, carried a weight in his shoulders that laughter only tried to hide. Then it came. The low, deliberate growl of tires on uneven pavement. A cruiser rolled past, slower than necessary. The officer inside glanced at the gathering without rolling down the window. His eyes lingered, unblinking, before the car turned the corner and disappeared. Fire crackled. Slim let out a long breath. "That's the 3rd time this week." "4th, Ghost corrected. Slim looked down at the notebook in his pocket. "I got it all in here. Times, names, badge numbers, when I can catch him. They say we're invisible, but I see everything." "You always did," Ghost said. Slim straightened. "You know what we are, man. We're the keepers. The ones who remember what this place used to be before glass towers and clean sidewalks pushed us out. They call it progress, but they don't see who it leaves behind." Ghost nodded faintly, as if he'd had that thought years ago and stored it away for later. "Some days," Slim said, staring at the notebook. "I think maybe that's why I'm still here. To remember, to remind You do more than that," Ghost said. Slim smiled. You always were good at giving just enough. Say 5 words and leave a man thinking all day." From behind them, Mama Cass's voice cut in. "You all better wrap it up. The city's been putting up new signs. No loitering, no sleeping, no living. Might as well say no breathing." She wasn't wrong. Over the past few weeks, signs had gone up like weeds, polished metal with polite wording, hiding cold intentions. The city was preparing to clean up, and everyone who lived under the bridges knew exactly what that meant. They finished breakfast and began to break off into their routines. Some disappeared into alleys. Others walked toward shelters or back entrances of churches that opened early. But ghosts stayed near the barrel, waiting. Little D started filming again. Then the silence cracked. 3 cruisers turned the corner fast, tires crunching glass and gravel as they surrounded the overpass. Doors swung open. Officers stepped out, with sharp movements and matching expressions. One of them, tall, broad, wearing mirrored sunglasses even in the dim light, moved like a man who thought the street belonged to him. "Officer Blake Roar." He adjusted his vest and scanned the group with practiced disregard. "Morning, folks," he said with artificial cheer. "City's got big plans for this spot. Time to pack up." Slim stepped forward, the notebook already in his hand. "We ain't bothering nobody. We clean our own area. We keep it quiet. You know that." Roar tilted his head. "I see a bunch of tents and complaints." "No complaints, just people trying to live," Slim said. "I got records, notes. Every patrol, every time someone got pushed or threatened. You want to see it?" He held out the notebook. Roar didn't even look at it. He knocked it to the ground with a flick of his hand. The pages fluttered like a wounded bird. Ghost didn't move. His hands stayed at his sides, but his feet shifted slightly. Roar smirked. "You threatening me with paperwork?" "I'm telling the truth," Slim replied. "Someone ought to." The tension in the air thickened. One of the officers flinched toward his holster, but stopped when a voice rang out behind them. "Enough." Mama Cass stood tall behind her cart. "We'll go. You don't need to make a scene. Let us have 5 minutes to gather our things." Roar ignored her. He stepped forward, grabbed Slim's coat with one hand, and stared him down. "You got 2 minutes." Slim didn't flinch. "You can scare a lot of folks, officer, but not me." Then it happened. Not a sound of violence. Not a struggle. Just a sudden, sharp shift in energy. Slim staggered. Something fell, and everything went still. People froze. A coffee cup tipped over in slow motion. In that quiet, something else moved. Not fear, not panic. It was Ghost. He stepped forward, not fast, not loud, but with a stillness that made time hesitate. His eyes weren't confused. They weren't angry. They were focused. He knelt beside Slim. Then he looked up. Just once, and that look was a quiet declaration. "Not today, not this man, not while I'm breathing." He didn't say a word, but something in the air changed. Even Roar took a step back, sensing something he couldn't name. Little D kept filming, his hands shaking. Mama Cass whispered something too soft to catch, and far above the overpass, the wind carried the moment. Through the city, past buildings and barriers and offices that never noticed the people who lived in their shadows, a whisper carried on the wind. "You never know who's watching." And in that moment, a forgotten man remembered exactly who he was. Nobody said a word. The overpass seemed to hold its breath. You could hear the buzz of a flickering street lamp. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once and stopped. Even the flame in the barrel quieted, its crackle softening as if the world itself was pausing to see what would happen next. Slim sat with his back against the wall, holding his ribs with one hand, his notebook lying on the ground a few feet away. He looked dazed but conscious. His eyes, normally sharp with wit, were clouded with something else, now shock maybe, or disappointment. Jeremiah Ghostbooker crouched beside him, his face unreadable. He wasn't panicking. He didn't ask for help. He simply placed one steady hand on Slim's shoulder, the way someone would touch an old friend at a gravesite, not because they were gone, but because something sacred had just been crossed. Little D's camera was still rolling. The screen trembled in his hand, but he didn't look away. Officer Roar adjusted his vest again, like a man fixing his tie before a mirror. His expression had changed. He didn't look victorious. He looked uncertain, as if something in Ghost's silence had begun whispering doubts in his chest. "You all right?" Ghost finally said to Slim. Slim tried to smile, but winced instead. You ever notice the folks who talk loudest are the ones who don't listen? Ghost didn't answer. He reached for the notebook on the ground, brushed the dust from its corner, and set it in Slim's lap with the same care someone might use to hand over a newborn. Officer Morales, still standing near the cruiser, called out, "That's enough. Let's wrap it up. We're not escalating today." Her tone was clipped, professional, but not cold. She glanced once at Ghost and something in her eyes lingered. Not recognition exactly, but curiosity. A question left unspoken. ROR hesitated, then turned back toward the group. "You've got 24 hours, he muttered. "Tomorrow, this place is getting cleared." And just like that, the cruisers pulled away. No sirens, no noise, just tires crunching gravel, and the slow fade of red brake lights around the corner. People started breathing again. Mama Cass moved first, her hands busy and firm. "Slim, baby, don't move too quick. Let me get my kit." Slim groaned. "I'm fine, Cass. Just knocked the wind out of me." "You hush," she said, already opening a battered first aid pouch. "Man your age still think he's made of rubber." The others began to reappear, cautiously, from doorways and shadows, checking on one another in hushed voices. The rhythm of the morning had been broken, but something else had stirred in its place. Ghost stood slowly, watching the corner where the cruisers had disappeared. Little D lowered his phone. "Who are you, man?" he asked. Ghost turned toward him, his expression softening only slightly. "Nobody important." "Nah," D said, stepping closer. "That's not true. I seen the way you moved, the way that cop backed down when you looked at him. You ain't just Ghost. You're someone." "I was," Ghost said. He didn't elaborate, but in that moment, little D felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not even admiration. It was understanding. People had stories under their skin, and some wore them like armor. Later that day, after the crowd had thinned and the sun was overhead, Ghost sat on a crate beside Slim, who was resting with his back against a stack of folded blankets. "He really kept notes on everything?" Ghost asked, gesturing to the notebook. Slim nodded. "Been doing it for 2 years now. Every time someone got pushed, or questioned, or warned, every time someone's things got thrown away, I write it all down. You think anyone will read it?" Slim looked up at the sky. "Doesn't matter. What matters is that it's remembered. If we don't tell it, who will?" Ghost said nothing for a long time. Then, finally, "You ever think about leaving?" Slim chuckled. "You mean go live somewhere safe, where folks pretend not to see you instead of reminding you they do?" "No," Ghost said. "I mean really, leaving. Starting fresh, somewhere quiet." Slim tapped his notebook. "I ain't leaving till I finish this." As the sun dipped behind a cluster of buildings, casting long golden rays across the sidewalk, a silver SUV pulled up at the edge of the block. It wasn't flashy, just clean, quiet, with tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that didn't belong near the overpass. Ghost noticed it instantly. The engine didn't turn off. No one got out. Slim noticed too. "That one of yours?" he asked casually. Ghost's gaze didn't waver. "Not anymore." The passenger window rolled down an inch, just enough to reveal a man in a dark suit, watching them. Then the SUV slowly pulled away and disappeared around the next corner, leaving only the fading scent of polished leather and expensive soap. Slim let out a low whistle. "Ghost, what you been hiding?" "Nothing I'm proud of," Ghost said. That night, under the stars that only barely cut through the city's haze, Ghost couldn't sleep. Not because of the noise, not because of the cold, but because something had been set in motion. He felt it the moment Roar touched Slim. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't even about anger. It was about return. There was a part of himself he had buried, for good reason. But sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it shows up in black boots and mirrored sunglasses, pushing old men against concrete. He sat up slowly, pulled a small object from his coat's inner lining, a coin, worn, heavy, dark bronze, the kind that wasn't spent, but earned. He stared at it for a long time, then slid it back into his coat. Little D was across the street, editing footage on a portable tablet, his headphones around his neck. "You ever heard of Delta?" Ghost asked quietly. D looked up, confused. "Delta Airlines." Ghost half smiled. "Not quite." "Why?" "No reason." But there was a reason, and that reason was beginning to stir. Not for revenge, but for something much harder. Justice, the kind that doesn't wear a badge, the kind that doesn't forget. And somewhere across the city, in a well-lit office, Officer Raw sat reviewing body cam footage from earlier. He paused on a frame, Ghost's face looking straight into the lens, calm, measured, unshaken. Something about it made him sit back slowly in his chair. He didn't know why, but he felt it in his gut, like a storm building over a still sea. The rain started just after midnight. It wasn't heavy, not yet, just enough to patter softly against the concrete and whisper through the torn tarps that covered makeshift shelters under the overpass. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, like ghosts trying to rise. Jeremiah sat upright, his back against the wall, his eyes open. He hadn't slept, not since the SUV came and went without a word. He'd been here before, not under this bridge, not in this city, but in the place between what was and what needed to be. The space where silence held weight and decisions changed lives. Slim slept nearby, wrapped in a thick quilt that Mama Cass had insisted he take. He coughed lightly in his sleep, then went still again. The night was cold, the kind of cold that didn't come from temperature, but from the feeling that something had shifted just beneath the surface of the world. Jeremiah pulled a folded piece of cloth from the inner pocket of his coat. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing an old photograph, black and white, frayed at the edges. 5 men stood side by side in a desert somewhere far from here, dust on their boots, shadows in their eyes. He was one of them. Back then, they called him Hawk, because he didn't blink, didn't speak unless it mattered, didn't miss. One of the others, the man in the middle, had a wide grin, and his arms around 2 of the others. Jackson. Ghost could still hear his laugh, deep and honest, echoing through whatever distant country they'd been dropped in. Jackson didn't come back. And sometimes, when the city got too quiet and the fire barrel stopped crackling, Ghost could still hear the last thing Jackson ever said to him. Don't forget who you are when you come home. But what if you never really did come home? As the rain grew steadier, the silence was broken by the rumble of a trash truck in the distance. Then by footsteps, not hurried, not scared, purposeful. Ghost didn't move. His ears picked up on the rhythm. One pair of boots, workman's stride, soft rubber soles. He waited until the shadow appeared near the edge of the overpass and resolved into a familiar figure. Morales. The detective. She wasn't in uniform. Civilian jacket, no partner. She walked like someone who had nothing to prove, or maybe, like someone tired of proving things to people who never listened. She stopped a few feet away and glanced around before stepping closer. I'm off duty, she said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the rain. Didn't come to arrest anyone. Ghost didn't answer. He didn't look surprised to see her, only watched. I reviewed the body cam footage, she went on. Officer Raw crossed a line. Ghost tilted his head slightly. A line. Several, she admitted. I filed a report. Internal Affairs will look at it. Maybe. You believe that? Ghost asked, not accusing, just curious. Morales sighed. I believe in systems that are supposed to work, but I also know what happens when they don't. Silence again. The rain picked up, drumming gently on the metal roof of the overpass. I know who you are, she said finally. Ghost raised an eyebrow. Just a fraction. You're not on paper. Not anymore, Morales continued. But I know enough. I made a few calls. Quiet ones. Ghost didn't confirm or deny. Delta Force, she said. 23 confirmed deployments. Disappeared off the grid 5 years ago, after what happened in Kuna province. They say you vanished, that you didn't want to be found. Jeremiah turned his gaze back toward the street. Maybe I didn't. Morales took a breath, looked down, then back at him. I'm not here to drag you out of the shadows. I'm here because I think something bigger is happening. And I think you already know that. He said nothing. There's been pressure from the city, she said. Developers, politicians. Someone wants this entire stretch cleared. Not just because of safety concerns, but because of what's under it. Ghost's eyes narrowed slightly. Under it, she nodded. Old storage tunnels from the railway. They run right beneath this neighborhood. Turns out the land is valuable, and someone's willing to move heaven and earth, and people to get it. Now Ghost leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And the police? Morales hesitated. Some, no, most don't. But the orders are coming from higher than my pay grade. Jeremiah stood slowly, brushing rain from his coat. He looked at her carefully, as if weighing her presence in the story unfolding. Then, quietly, he asked, why tell me this? Because I've been watching, she said. I saw the way you Descalated the way Raw backed off. You didn't need to fight to make a point. That kind of control ... It's rare. You want my help? He asked. No, she said. I want to help you. She slipped something into his hand, a small USB drive. There's video on here, documents, not the kind you find in city files. Someone passed it to me anonymously. If the people watching this community get their way, it won't be just your friend who gets hurt. They're planning something. Clean, illegal looking, but it's not right. Ghost held the drive in his hand like it was a live wire. I shouldn't have this, she said. But you should. Then she turned and walked into the rain, fading into the dark like a character exiting a play before the final act. Later, back under the top, Ghost slid the USB into little D's tablet. What is it? D asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Proof, Ghost said. On the screen appeared a list of contracts, emails, drone footage of the neighborhood, developers marking buildings, highlighted names on documents. And one familiar face. ROR. In a suit, shaking hands with a man whose smile didn't reach his eyes. You filming tomorrow? Ghost asked. Little D nodded slowly. Yeah. Good, Ghost said. Film everything, don't stop. Slim stirred. Something happened. Ghost looked down at the screen, then at his friend. Not yet, he said. But it will. He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like a promise. The morning after Morales left felt different. The air was still damp from the rain, but it wasn't just the weather that had shifted. Something in the rhythm of the street had changed. The birds weren't singing, the city buses rolled by slower, and even the wind seemed cautious. Jeremiah moved with purpose now, not rushed, just ... alert. Slim noticed it before anyone else. You're moving like we're back in Beirut, he muttered, watching his friend roll up the old tarp with quiet precision. That look in your eyes, that's Ghost before energy. Jeremiah didn't respond. He was scanning the area with every turn of his head, taking mental snapshots, looking for things that didn't belong. New vehicles, shifted shadows, men pretending not to watch. Slim sat up straighter. You found something, didn't you? Jeremiah crouched by the fire barrel and held his hands over the fresh kindling. It's not just about us. It's about the land. What do you mean? There's a plan to clear the whole block, Jeremiah said, low, legal on paper, but it's not honest. Slim let out a low whistle. Cities always had an itch for concrete and cranes, but using cops to scare off people with nowhere else to go. Jeremiah nodded slowly. They're moving fast, and they don't care who gets hurt. Little D appeared, his camera swinging from his neck. That lady cop, Morales, she dropped something off last night, didn't she? Jeremiah didn't answer, but D took it as confirmation. I've been uploading clips from the last few days, just short pieces for now. Faces, voices, the way you all care for each other. It's already getting views. Be careful, Jeremiah said, his voice softer now. Truth has weight. Some people don't like carrying it. But little D's eyes gleamed. Nah, truth's what I'm here for. I want people to see us, not the version the world imagines, the real us. Across the street, a black sedan, parked. Two men stepped out, both in plain clothes, both wearing the same kind of polite tension that screamed they were from somewhere official. They didn't walk toward anyone. They just watched, took notes, got back in. Jeremiah tracked them without moving his head. Mama Cass came around the corner with her cart, today filled with oranges and boiled eggs. Y'all look like a group of men fixing to start a storm, she said, eyeing them one by one. No storm, Slim replied with a wink. Just checking the forecast. Mama Cass gave Jeremiah a longer look. You planning something, Ghost? I'm planning not to get surprised again, he said. Mama Cass raised an eyebrow. Well, whatever you're planning, make sure it doesn't land you in the morgue. Ghosts gave the smallest smile. I don't plan on going anywhere, Mama. That day, little D filmed more than usual, not just the people. He started narrating, telling the story from the ground. His voice cracked once or twice, but he didn't stop. Most people don't know what survival looks like, he said into the mic. They think it's just breathing. But survival is making a joke when you haven't eaten. It's protecting people, even when you've got nothing left. It's knowing how to read shadows, and knowing when those shadows are watching back. He pointed his lens across the street, where the black sedan had returned. Then something strange happened. Around dusk, 2 volunteers from a church arrived, young people with bright shirts and a foldable table full of sandwiches. No big announcement, no signs, just quiet service. It wasn't the food that caught Jeremiah's attention. It was the van they came in. He recognized the license plate. He'd seen it on the drone footage. Morales had passed him. Slim watched him freeze. What is it? This isn't just charity, Jeremiah murmured. It's cover. He crossed the street like a shadow cutting through orange light. The two volunteers smiled nervously as he approached. Evening, sir. You hungry? Jeremiah studied them. Where's your pastor? He doesn't come out on weekdays, one of them said. Jeremiah nodded toward the van. This is city issued, used for inspection teams. The girl looked confused. We borrowed it. Church has a partnership. Jeremiah leaned slightly closer, voice low but firm. Tell your supervisor whoever sent you is being watched by someone who doesn't miss. The girl's smile faltered. Sir, you're just doing your job, he interrupted. But make sure they know someone sees through the smoke. He turned and walked away, hands in his coat pockets. Back at the overpass, Little D was uploading a new clip titled They're Watching Us, but We're Watching Back. That night, Jeremiah didn't sleep. He made a call, the first in over 5 years. The line rang 6 times before a gravelly voice picked up. Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again, the man said. Do you still have access to military sat feeds? A pause. Depends on who's asking. Tell them Hawk's asking. Another pause, then a sharp inhale. ... What do you need? Eyes on Memphis, Jeremiah said. Sector 14B. Someone's about to erase a street full of people, and they're planning to make it look clean. The man on the other end of the line exhaled. You really think it's worth jumping back into the fire? Jeremiah's answer was simple. They already lit the match. A full day passed. Then the rhythm of the street remained the same on the surface. Mama Cass's cart clattered down the alley every morning. Slim's stories danced around the fire barrel like old jazz riffs, and Little D kept filming, his lens now sharper, more purposeful. But beneath it all, something had changed. Jeremiah's silence wasn't quiet anymore. It was focused, intentional, calculating. He had always been the kind of man who moved like a question you didn't want to answer. But now he was moving, like a man who already knew the answer and was just waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. Slim noticed the difference in how Jeremiah stood when the morning buses passed, feet slightly apart, head tilted, as if listening for a frequency no one else could hear. You building something in that head of yours, Slim said one morning, or just waiting for it all to fall down? Jeremiah didn't look up, but by late afternoon, the black sedan came back. This time it parked across from Mama Cass's cart, engine running. The windows didn't roll down. No one stepped out. Mama Cass glanced at it once, then said, louder than usual, ain't it funny how folks who say they're here to help always stay in their cars? That earned a ripple of laughter from the crowd, but the tension was rising. Jeremiah felt it in his chest like a storm front moving over the horizon. Not the panic kind, the kind you recognize when you've been through more than your share of storms. He leaned toward Little D. Don't film right now. Just watch. Who comes, who doesn't, who looks nervous. Little D nodded, slipping his phone into his jacket, watching now like a student under a master's eye. A few blocks over, Detective Morales sat in her own unmarked car, watching the same scene from a different angle. She had a half-eaten sandwich in her lap, but her focus was on the van parked behind a vacant lot. The license plate was registered to a city contractor, but the contractor didn't exist. She picked up her burner phone. He's right, she said into the receiver. Something's happening. Not just local either. There's federal interest, surveillance-grade equipment, non-uniform personnel. They're not just clearing out homeless camps, they're mapping resistance. The voice on the other end asked, you want out? Morales looked down at her badge resting on the passenger seat. No, she said. I want a front row seat, back under the overpass. Jeremiah stood near the fire barrel, a simple notebook in his hand. It looked like Slim's, but it wasn't. This one was newer. Inside were sketches, layouts, movement patterns, blind spots. He was drawing the street like a battlefield, but not one built for guns. One built for light, for witness, for truth. He turned to Slim. We've got 3 days, then they move in. How do you know? Because the SAT scans confirmed it. I had someone look. Slim whistled low. You called in favors. Ghost, you really back in it? Jeremiah didn't smile. I'm not in it for me. That night, more strange vans appeared around the area, always parked just out of sight. The streetlights on one side of the block flickered out, all at once. An accidental outage. Jeremiah noted the time, 11:43 p.m. At sunrise. A news van rolled through. No one had called them. They were there for a different story, something about rising crime, but little D saw the opportunity. He approached them politely. "You want to see something real?" he asked the young reporter, and then he showed her a clip. Not the dramatic ones, the quiet ones. The laughter, the food sharing, the small dignity in a community that had nothing but gave everything. The reporter's expression changed. Later that day, the clip aired on local TV. Just 30 seconds, but enough. Jeremiah watched it from a cracked screen at a local laundromat. He didn't smile, but his jaw relaxed. Little D walked in with a backpack full of batteries. "You saw it?" "I did." "They're asking for more footage, stories, names." Jeremiah looked at him. "Give them everything." That evening, Jeremiah found Morales waiting by the alley near Mama Cass's spot. She was dressed in civilian clothes, hood pulled up, posture casual, but her eyes were sharp. "You knew this was bigger than one dirty cop," she said. "I didn't know how big until they started sending people without names," he replied. Morales handed him a flash drive. "There's a private security firm working under a city development contract. The company has ties to a foreign intelligence group. They're testing strategies for civil dislocation response." Jeremiah raised an eyebrow. "Fancy way of saying they want to learn how to erase communities and call it progress." She added, "Why, tell me." "Because," Morales said, her voice tight, "you're the only one who knows how to make them. Look in the mirror." Jeremiah took the drive. That night, he stayed awake again, writing something on fresh paper. Not a plan, not a map, but a statement. It began, "You want to erase us, but we are not ghosts. We are the living memory of this street." By dawn, every light post along the block had a copy taped to it. By noon, the local paper had published Little D's footage, and by sunset, national media started calling the story. Had cracked open, but it wasn't over. Because sometimes, truth doesn't set you free right away. Sometimes, it draws fire, and Ghost was ready. The city didn't sleep that night. Not really. Something electric moved through the air, not loud. Not panicked but persistent, like the hum of streetlights when you're alone and listening closely. Memphis was watching now. The country was watching. By morning, the media vans weren't just rolling through, they were stationed. Tripods lined sidewalks. Microphones picked up voices that had been ignored for decades. The little stretch of broken concrete beneath the overpass had become something else. A stage, a courtroom, a place where silence had finally decided to speak, but not everyone was watching for the truth. A nondescript grey van arrived just after sunrise. No logos, no plates. 3 men stepped out, all in matching tan coats with clipboards and earpieces. They didn't look at the cameras. They didn't smile at Mama Cass. One of them pointed at the old fire barrel and whispered into his mic. Jeremiah, already awake and positioned by the far edge of the lot, was waiting for them. Little D whispered from behind the dumpster, "That, them." Jeremiah nodded. "Contracted consultants. Quiet cleanup teams. They'll make it look like a zoning issue, then arrest, relocate, and call it urban renewal. What do? We let the light in." Jeremiah stepped forward, slow and calm, like he wasn't walking toward danger, but toward an answer. One of the men in the tan coat noticed and tensed, but Jeremiah simply lifted a small badge from his pocket. Not a police badge, not military. Just a worn leather ID wallet that read United States Special Operations Command, retired. The man with the clipboard squinted. "You here to file a complaint, sir?" Jeremiah didn't flinch. "I'm here to stop a pattern." By now, Slim had gathered the crowd, not by shouting, but by whispering. Word spreads differently in a community that's learned to survive. Within minutes, more than 40 people stood watching quietly, holding signs, wearing cameras, speaking. With their silence, the consultants backed off, nervous, unsure how to proceed in full view. That's when Morales arrived, this time in full detective gear, flanked by 2 internal affairs officers and a federal agent. Her tone was direct. "Step away from these individuals and return to your vehicle. You're not authorized to act in this jurisdiction." "You can't give that order," one of the men argued. "I can when you're under investigation for civil rights violations under false municipal pretenses," she replied without blinking. "You've been served." She handed over a sealed envelope with federal insignia. Jeremiah glanced sideways at her. You move quick. I don't like repeating chapters, Morales replied. Time to start writing a new one. The cameras captured everything. Bomber Cass stepped up to the media mics, holding a wrinkled piece of paper in her hand. It was one of Jeremiah's flyers from the day before. She read slowly, her voice heavy but clear. You want to erase us, but we are not ghosts. We are the living memory of this street. We are not the forgotten, we are the foundation. The crowd behind her erupted not in cheers, but in something deeper. Applause that felt like thunder rolling off walls that had long since learned how to echo pain. It wasn't celebration, it was declaration. Still, the tension wasn't over. Later that day, Jeremiah found Little D packing up his gear near the edge of the block. You're leaving? Little D nodded. News outlet in Atlanta wants to fund a docuseries, they said. What I filmed here changed the way they see things. They want me to keep going. Jeremiah handed him a folded sheet of paper. Then tell them the next story too. The ones still hiding in alleys and underpasses. Don't stop. What about you? I was never the story, Jeremiah said. Just the reason one could finally be told. By the end of the week, the development project was paused. The city council launched an internal review. Officer Raw was placed on indefinite leave, but more importantly, a city full of people who had never paid attention to the invisible now saw them, spoke to them, listened to them. The old overpass got a mural 2 weeks later. It showed two men standing near a fire barrel, surrounded by outlines of a crowd. One man was laughing, hand mid-air in a story. The other stood still, watching. Guarding. Slim called it The Witnesses. He painted a single line beneath it. We never left. You just stopped looking. Months passed. Jeremiah stayed in Memphis, working with shelters, helping with coordination between veterans programs and outreach centers. But some nights, you'd still find him at the old spot watching, not speaking. One such evening, Slim approached with 2 steaming cups of coffee. You know, he said, people keep asking who started all this. Who saved this street? Jeremiah didn't answer. Slim sat beside him and sipped his coffee. But I tell M the truth. I say it wasn't about one man. It was about what happens when one person refuses to stay quiet, when he makes silence uncomfortable. That's what changes things. A long pause followed. Then Jeremiah spoke, voice low and measured. They thought we were ghosts, but ghosts don't build fire. Ghosts don't hold the line. Slim smiled. And we sure don't fade. Across the street, a group of kids were playing, laughing loud as their voices bounced off the mural walls. One of them looked at the painting and pointed. Who's that? He asked. That, said his mother, watching from nearby, is why you always speak up. And the fire barrel burned just a little brighter.